Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Let's Auraxium, and today we're going to be looking at a weapon that barely needs an introduction, the Betelgeuse. A weapon that if you scream its name into the hills of Amarish, you'll hear an NC player shouting back, OP! Or at least that's what I think they're shouting at me. It's really hard to tell over the sound of all the ravens. But is the weapon all it's hyped up to be? How large has my planet-side edict grown since acquiring the weapon? And in honor of its sparkliness, will I talk in a super gay voice? The answers are maybe 4 inches and I only talk in my super gay voice for Roytech, so don't even ask. Now there's 2 things I want to mention before I start this review. The first of which is that a lot of the information out there on the Betelgeuse is outdated and incorrect. So I had to figure out a lot of these stats by doing testing which revolved around recording footage at 30 frames a second and then counting the frames to get the actual stats of things. It's because of this testing method that a few things are left up to interpretation of when they actually start and when they actually end, so the numbers might not be absolutely perfect, but they're going to be incredibly close to the actual stats of the weapon. The second thing I want to mention is that the Betelgeuse is basically a variant of the Orion. So instead of comparing it to all other LMGs, we're going to compare it just to the Orion. So this is going to be the Orion Betelgeuse showdown a lot of people have been wanting to see. Now with all of that out of the way, let's look at the stats. Now before we begin to compare these two weapons, there is a small change I need to make to the horizontal recoil stats of the Orion. Because the Orion has the ability to equip a forward grip and the Betelgeuse does not, so we're going to factor that in to make sure it's a fair fight. Now let's start by comparing what's similar between the two weapons. Starting off with a fire rate of 750 rounds a minute and a damage model of 143 damage up to 10 meters, dropping off to 125 damage up to 65 meters. They're exactly the same and they're both the fastest killing LMG available to the Vanu Sovereignty. Next are its cone of fire stats. All of them. They're exactly the same across the board. Here they are if you're interested. And finally, rounding off the similarities are its first shot recoil multiplier of 2.25, a velocity of 570 meters a second, and that beautiful, luscious 0.75 ADS speed multiplier. Oh, daddy loves it. So here's what sets the two weapons apart. First of which is its horizontal recoil stats. The Orion has less of it, 25% less to be exact, because of its ability to equip a forward grip. And I can honestly say after Auraxiuming both these weapons that the Betelgeuse is a bit trickier to handle when you're trying to push the effective range of the weapon. And lastly, its heat reloading mechanics. Now, for those of you who don't know, the Betelgeuse has a heat reloading mechanic that basically functions similar to how a repair gun works, meaning the more you fire, the more heat it builds up, and you can cool it down in between. It also has infinite ammo, and the weapon cannot be reloaded, meaning the cooldown is your only option to get more bullets back. Now, a lot of the information out there on the exact function of the heat reloading mechanics for this weapon are incorrect. So here are the actual numbers for how the heat reloading mechanic functions. I'll put the numbers on screen for you to check out, but I won't bore you with the math. So it has a magazine size of 49 rounds. That's 1 less shot than the Orion. It'll take exactly half of a second to engage the cooldown, and then will cool down at a rate of 13.4 bullets every second. That would bring its effective short reloading speed if you only fired 48 rounds to 3.66 seconds, which strangely enough is actually the long reload speed of the Orion. However, if you overheat the weapon, it will take 6.57 seconds to fully cool down the weapon, and you cannot fire it until it's fully cooled. To put that in perspective, that's just a titch longer than the reload speed of the Gauss saw. So that brings us to our final question. Is this gun worth your time, and is the weapon OP? Well, let's start with the first question. Is the gun worth Auraxiuming? Yes, but is it worth Auraxiuming 5 other weapons before obtaining it? Not really. Vanu's selection of LMGs aren't exactly great. It's not that our LMGs are bad, it's just that the selection isn't amazingly diverse. I mean, to start with, the Ursa is like struggling with some sort of pig-sloth hybrid. It just doesn't feel good to use. And when it comes to our two more rounded guns, the Pulsar LSW and the SV88, I'm going to quote Rel by saying the only reason you would choose the LSW over the SVA88 is the price tag, or if you're looking for something new to put an Auraxium metal on. But is the weapon overpowered like a lot of people claim it is? Personally, I don't think it is, but then again, I am primarily a Vanu player, so let my bias be known. However, there are a few things that I do feel that needs a second glance about the weapon. The first of which is that the cooldown cycle of the weapon is always functioning no matter what happens. Meaning that if you fire off a few rounds, switch to your secondary, switch back to your primary, you'll come back to a fully reloaded weapon so long as you've waited the correct amount of time. Same goes for if you get revived with an overheated weapon or even a half overheated weapon. As long as you have waited the correct amount of time, the weapon will come back fully reloaded. And I will admit this can be a bit of a dirty trick if you know how to time it right. Special thanks to Royd Tech for helping me test this. The other aspect about the weapon that I do feel needs a second glance at is what happens when you overheat the weapon. Personally, I feel that it should be just a bit more punishing and require a forced reload instead of switching out the weapon and waiting for it to cool down. But outside of that, can I ever say the heat reloading mechanic was the determining factor between me getting a kill or not? No, not really. On top of that, because I can't use a forward grip with the weapon, there were a few times that I felt a longer range target got away when he shouldn't have, simply because I couldn't get those last few shots into him. Also, if you play super aggressive and try to use the heat reloading mechanic to its fullest, you're usually going to be diving into situations where your weapon is reloaded, but your shields have not fully recharged. And if you really try to abuse this aspect, you're usually going to be going into situations where you purposely are giving yourself the disadvantage. Only time that I ever felt that the heat reloading mechanic of the Betelgeuse was truly something that gave me an advantage over my enemies was situations where I found myself camping choke points or holding capture points, guarding very specific areas. Because I never needed to duck deeper back into cover to reload my weapon, I didn't have to worry about someone popping up at just the moment I decided to hit the reload key. But even in that situation, if you're gonna run into a building that the enemy holds the capture point in, you're gonna have to make the assumption that there's someone in there guarding the door. But really, at the end of the day, what is the Betelgeuse? The Betelgeuse is basically an Orion that's a bit trickier to handle with a very interesting reloading mechanic, and quite honestly, the weapon does feel great because of this. Anyways guys, that's it for now. My name's been iGoRawr, and I'll see you guys next time. You ready? 1, okay. 2, 3. Oh, what? Oh, reload bug, why? Alright, 1, 2, 3.
What the hell are you doing? Dear God.
We're having fun!
What the hell is going on?
This guy here.
Well, you're creating a massive echo. It's actually pretty cool.
Again, 3, 2, 1.
God. Oh? Oh.
I don't think he likes it. Oh, there's a lip there.